What if your home could whisper back your name? What if late at night you heard a child's voice calling from inside the walls? A voice that knew you, a voice that would never stop. This isn't just another haunted house story. Tonight you'll hear the true nightmare of a family who discovered that their home was not empty. It was occupied. Welcome to Ghost Stories, A Child's Name in the Walls. And if you're new here, make sure you subscribe to Dark Night Horror Stories, the channel that takes you deeper into the shadows every week. Because once you've heard a story like this, you'll want to be sure you never miss the next. So, turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and listen carefully. Because what begins as a whisper will soon be calling your name. By late winter in Sydney, the ache came back like an appointment the body kept without asking. He felt it first in the shower. An almond-hard bead under the left collarbone, not quite round, not quite still. When he pressed, a nerve rang like a struck glass. The GP had called it a teratoma years ago, a freakish bouquet of tissue that sometimes grew teeth or hair, a word people laughed at until it lived under their skin. He hadn't laughed then. He didn't now. At night, the ache graduated to presence. He lay in his Newtown flat, listening to possums tramp the roof like thieves, and imagined the lump listening back. In the mirror, the skin over it looked slightly polished, as if something inside were smoothing its way outward with the patience of a craftsman. Sleep came mean and shallow. In the thinner hours, he dreamed about a red marble rolling across a wooden floor. Tapping gently against the base of a bed. Tap, pause, tap, until the sound learned his name. He booked a consult at St. Augustine Private, glass atrium, eucalyptus in planters, a lobby that smelled like antiseptic and rain. The receptionist had a voice trained to calm. "Dr. Hawthorne can see you this afternoon," she said, and the way she framed "can" felt like mercy. He touched his collarbone through his shirt and felt heat blooming. Not fever, not exactly. A readiness. On the way home to grab his imaging discs, the ache spread little feelers. Itch, sting, a tug under the sternum like a fish testing line. He told himself tumors don't want things. They only grow. The tram bell clanged and he flinched hard enough to catch stares. In the window's reflection, his face looked thinner by one good dream and one good meal. Behind his reflection for a split second, a child stood at the far end of the carriage. Blurry, hair damp, eyes too steady. When he turned, there was only a woman scrolling her phone and a red prank of sunset painted on the glass. That night he pressed the lump again, harder, to prove it was all his. It pushed back, not movement, he told himself, a pulse transmitted, a trick of fingers. Somewhere in the building, a neighbor dropped a marble, or a bead. It rolled and would not stop. Hawthorne's rooms were old money hidden inside new glass. Leather chairs, a brass skeleton of a fern under cloche, a framed lithograph of medicinal plants, hawthorn berries circled in neat ink. He arrived early and still waited because important people teach time manners. When the doctor swept in, he brought spring with him. Salt gray hair, warm baritone, the kind of smile that convinces you your fear is reasonable and solvable. "You must be Elias," he said, as if they were picking each other out across a party. "Let's have a look." Hands warm, touch exact. The palpation made lights prickle at the edge of Elias's vision. Hawthorne studied the scan, nodded once, and tapped the screen where the shadow budded like a seed. "Recurrence compact, will biopsy, excise if cooperative. I have a theater window tomorrow." He made surgery sound like trimming a hedge. "Any family history of unusual growths? Birth defects? Lost pregnancies?" The last question arrived disguised as casual and sat too long between them. Elias said no, then cleared his throat and said it again. The door opened and a woman stepped in with tea. Tall auburn hair pinned carelessly. Green silk scarf knotted like an afterthought that had become a tradition. "Daphne," Hawthorne said, "my wife. She keeps me civilized." Her smile was not decorative. It was assessment softened into charm. "Honey with the chamomile helps the shakes," she said, and Elias realized his hand was rattling the saucer as if trying to signal something in Morse. Daphne drifted to the window. "You'll be fine," she said, not as comfort but as instruction. "It's a good season for removing what doesn't belong." She peered at the atrium where a boy in a school uniform pressed his face to the glass and then vanished into a group. For an instant, the curve of her mouth fell, a private weather change, and then returned. She set a card on the table, a stylized branch engraved in red. "If you need anything after the procedure, meals, a lift, breathing, ring." On the consent form, A clause about donating tissue to research waited like a polite trap. Hawthorne tapped the line lightly. Optional, of course. We're learning so much from these curiosities. They behave like they remember other plans. He said it like a clever joke that had no business being clever. Elias initialed anyway because you do. Because the desk is between you and forgetting pain. Because the doctor's pen is already pointing where you should sign. As he left, a trolley rattled past, metal singing. A red glass bead clinked in a bowl, catching light. The nurse pocketed it with a practiced gesture, and Elias told himself he hadn't seen that. They booked him for an early list. Nothing after midnight, the nurse said, and hunger obeyed like a superstition. By dawn, the theater lights turned his skin theater white, and Hawthorne's voice poured calm through the mask. You'll feel heavy. Count back from 10. He made it to 7. Dreamless black opened like a lift door and swallowed him. He woke in recovery with a throat that felt borrowed and a pressure bandage stippling heat into his clavicle. Hawthorne's notes at the foot of the bed were brisk. Mass excised, margins clean, specimen to lab. Daphne arrived instead of a nurse, as if she had always belonged on this side of the curtain. Hospitals are cruel with sleep, she said, drawing the privacy screen half closed. We live close. Come stay the night. We've done it for other patients. My husband hates sending people home to empty rooms on the first evening. Pain is louder when it thinks it's alone. He should have said no. He said yes because the idea of his flat with its tapping pipes and nocturnal marbles made the skin over his wound tighten. Daphne's SUV ate the short drive to Cliff Street, a terrace near the ocean where wind salted the railings and an old jacaranda had chosen the front garden as its cathedral. The house smelled like citrus and good linen. In the guest room, the bed wore a quilt hand-stitched in stars, each point imperfect and therefore expensive. Ring if the pain kicks, Daphne said, laying out Panadine like communion. If you can't sleep, there's broth on the stove. Don't go downstairs after 1. She laughed at herself. Superstition. He slept as if thrown. At 12:43, he woke to a child's footfall passing the door. Quick, light, familiar in the way of long-ago apartments. He sat up too fast, pain bit. He breathed around it. The landing was empty except for a line of wooden animals on the skirting board. Zebra, lion, a tiny red marble pressed into a giraffe's eye socket as a repair. The house settled, or something in the house did. Back in bed, the bandage pulsed like it had learned a heartbeat of its own. Under the dressing, something shifted. Not the bright pain of stitches, not the deep ache of insult, but the soft insistence of a small hand, testing the inside of a glove. He lay still, the way people do when a huntsman sits above the pillow and you bargain with stillness. A floorboard sighed. At the far wall, behind the headboard, something clicked once softly, like a marble finding a little wooden hole at the corner of a frame and deciding to live there. From downstairs, a voice hummed 3 notes and stopped, as if someone had remembered a lullaby and then remembered why not to sing it. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. How's the pain? He typed manageable and didn't send it. The unsent word hung on the screen like a fly in amber. The house listened through wood and lamb's wool and bone. Somewhere in the thin space between plaster and studs, a child said a name he hadn't heard in years. Not his, David. Morning arrived pale, the kind that doesn't commit to being day. The guest room smelled faintly of citrus still, but another aroma had crept under the door, broth thick with herbs. He shuffled downstairs in borrowed slippers, the stitches tugging each step into an education. Daphne waited in the kitchen, ladling soup from a cast-iron pot that seemed older than the house. She wore no makeup, hair braided back, eyes startlingly awake for someone who had also lived the night. Good timing, she said, as if she'd known his exact moment of descent. She set the bowl before him, steam curling, surface dotted with oil like tiny constellations. He ate. Salt, marrow, something root deep. The warmth radiated down to his bones. For 10 minutes he believed the night before had been pain dream. Footsteps marble the child's name. Then he saw it. At the end of the counter, tucked beside a jar of utensils, a red glass bead. Perfect sphere. It caught the light and spun it in his direction. Your broth is unusual, he said, forcing small talk. Daphne's smile was gentle and wrong, like someone rehearsing for a role. It's restorative, she answered. When our David was ill, it was the only thing he could keep down. She took his empty bowl before he finished the last sip. Rest now. Healing is fastest when the house approves. He wanted to ask about David, but her eyes dared him not to. He climbed back upstairs. On the landing, the line of wooden animals had changed, rearranged into a circle, the red marble lion at the center. He told himself children once lived here and games echo long. He told himself many things, none of them sufficient. Pain meds made him heavy, but the house resisted sleep. He wandered, pretending curiosity was stronger than fear. The study door stood ajar. Inside, shelves of medical texts, jars labeled with Latin, and a child's photo frame face down on the desk. He turned it over. Sepia boy, hair damp, smile stubborn, eyes direct. A smear across the glass looked like a thumb that hadn't been cleaned in years. Beside the frame lay a journal bound in cracked leather. He flipped pages. Hawthorne's precise hand detailed surgical excisions, graphs, strange notations about viability. Dates stretched back decades. The language slid from clinical to personal. David resisted the last attempt. Body unsuitable, soul restless. We require a compatible vessel. The final page bore yesterday's date. Beneath it, his own initials. A sound broke the reading, something soft dragging along floorboards above like bare feet, reluctant but obedient. He shoved the journal closed, shoved it back. On his way out, his sleeve knocked the photo. It landed face up again, the boy's eyes on him as though confirming recognition. In the hall, Daphne's voice floated like incense. Some things we keep for family. Some things we keep for guests. He froze. Silence after her words tasted like approval withheld. Back in the guest room, he checked the bandage. The skin pulsed. For the first time he saw it. Faint bruising radiating not out but in, like veins drawing a map toward something at the core. That night, Daphne brought tea unasked. The cup trembled faintly as she set it down. It helps with dreams, she said, which made refusing impossible. The tea was bitter, metallic. He drank enough to be polite, not enough to surrender. At 1 the house shifted awake. Floorboards sighed. Walls ticked like clocks sinking. He lay rigid until footsteps stopped outside the door. The knob turned once, politely, then fully. Hawthorne entered, white coat exchanged for black. Daphne followed with a candle. Between them walked Absence shaped like a boy. Small, shoulders narrow, face hidden in shadow. In his palm rolled a red marble, clinking against bone. "Elias," Hawthorne said softly. "It's time." No clinical baritone now. This was liturgy. Daphne set the candle at the foot of the bed. Wax dripped like seconds. The boy stepped closer. The marble fell and spun in the hollow beneath the bed frame, finding a notch as if prepared. The house exhaled. The bandage seared. Something inside pressed outward, eager. He tried to rise, but the tea had sewn his limbs to the mattress. Only his eyes obeyed. Above him, Hawthorne raised a silver instrument. Daphne whispered a lullaby, words broken, notes cracked, but the tune unmistakable. A mother singing her son awake. The boy crouched, hands resting on the quilt, face still hidden. "David," Hawthorne breathed, reverent. The lump under Elias's collarbone answered with its own pulse. The candle flame thinned and lengthened, a needle sewing light through dark. Hawthorne's shadow climbed the ceiling like a second man trying to arrive first. Daphne stood at the bedside humming, the melody turning corners and returning to the same 3 notes as if they were coordinates. The boy, Absence shaped to a boy, tilted his head toward Elias's chest like a listener leaning into a favorite part. "Only a slip," Hawthorne murmured, breath warm with clove. The silver instrument flashed and kissed the edge of the dressing. Not a cut, not yet, just a promise. Under the gauze, something responded. The lump leapt against the bandage. The pulse doubled, then synced to the lullaby. He had the insane thought that the thing inside was remembering the song. His limbs felt filed down to bone by the tea. He moved a finger's width and every molecule shouted treason. "David, darling," Daphne whispered, eyes never leaving the place where skin rose and fell. "He's a good boy. He carries the door." Her hand hovered an inch above the wound, measuring warmth. The candle guttered, recovered, guttered again. The wax made lakes along the carved footboard. The red marble under the bed knocked once, tick, as if timing the downbeat. Hawthorne drew a symbol on the gauze with iodine. a little crown of thorns nestling a circle. "You'll feel pressure," he told Elias, returning to the bedside manner of bright rooms. "No pain." The word pain arrived anyway, not as clangor but as weight, rolling up from under the ribs where the diaphragm learns to pray. The boy's hands were on the quilt now. Small hands, dimples like punctuation in soft knuckles. Between his fingers, the red marble glowed as if remembering daylight. "Not yet," Daphne said, and the boy's hands withdrew. Elias found a seam where fear could breathe. "Who is he?" The question came out shredded. Hawthorne didn't look at his face. "Our son," he said simply. "Borrowed by fever. Misplaced by an indifferent world. We prepared for him, but the first vessels were unwelcoming. You've been generous without knowing." Elias swallowed around a throat made of sand. "You can't put a person in another person." Daphne's smile hurt to see. "You'd be astonished what bodies agree to when asked in the right language." The room leaned inward. The second heart under his skin learned a new rhythm. It wasn't his. Wind came off the ocean and climbed the terrace, knocking at the sash like an invited guest too polite to enter. Somewhere below, a clock chimed one, the hour Daphne had told him not to test. The house obeyed its own rules. Floorboards lifted and settled like a ribcage learning a new inhale. Downstairs, cupboards thudded open in sequence, a peristalsis of oak. The stairwell deepened into a well. Hawthorne placed a small oak bowl on the bedside table. In it floated pale flecks like paper snow. "Shavings," he said, "of what's been removed. Memory isn't only in the head." Daphne dipped a finger, touched the flecks to her tongue, and did not flinch. The boy watched her and did the same, mimicking perfectly, though his finger didn't disturb the surface. The water filmed and cleared, as if drinking itself. Elias fought the stitchwork sleep creeping up his limbs. "Please," he said, and startled himself with the honesty of it. Daphne smoothed the quilt. "Please goes further than no," she said, as if that were comfort. "You're kind. Kindness makes a wide doorway." Hawthorne's gloved fingers pressed lightly along the edge of the gauze. The pulse there pushed back like a fish nosing the palm of a diver who'd stayed too long. The house made a new sound. A child's footstep in a hallway long erased by renovations. A toy car crossing boards that are no longer there. A marble rolling and rolling toward a corner that has learned to be a mouth. Elias tasted iron. The stitches under the dressing tugged and then loosened as if being unknotted from within. He looked at the boy. He could not look, and saw the face at last. Not fully. A pale suggestion, features washed thin by absence. But the eyes were particular. Wet green with a fleck of amber at 2 o'clock in the left iris. Familiar like a story you'd been told once. Sick on a couch while afternoon TV murmured. Daphne noticed the seeing and moved into the line between them. "Careful," she murmured to someone not exactly in the room. Hawthorne lifted the silver. "Open," he told the wound, and the candle flame flared tall as a violin note. The skin obliged with a sigh that was not breath. Light collapsed to a ring. Elias stared through it at his own chest. The gauze peeled back to reveal a small mouth made of tissue, petaled and wet, pulsing with the shy eagerness of a newborn. It wasn't a mouth, he told himself. It merely looked like wanting. Hawthorne steadied the edges with clamps that sang against one another. Daphne held the candle low so the flame's reflection lay in the wound like a second sky. "David," she whispered, "walk softly." The boy placed the red marble on the headboard, where a carved rosette had lost its eye a century ago. It clicked into the socket and sat there bright as a living pupil. The room found a focus through it. Elias's vision tunneled so that all of them were seen through that little red world. Hawthorne taller. Daphne thinner, the boy nearer. "Count down," Hawthorne told him, as if anesthesia could be conjured without gas. Elias tried. 10 was a child on a beach. 9 was a teenage door slamming. 8 was a cardboard box full of someone else's winter. 7 was a name he hadn't heard spoken to him in years. Eli, the version his mother used when she wanted to make him smaller for safety. He reached 6 and the boy put his palm, cool as unpainted wood, over Elias's sternum. The lump rose. Not out, not exactly, up like a head lifting from under a blanket. Hawthorne guided, coaxed, whispered Latin that sounded as much kitchen as chapel. Daphne cried without changing her face. The house held its breath. "Stop," Elias said, or thought he did. His limbs agreed politely and did nothing. The world pinwheeled once and settled again with a new horizon. He felt a weight leave him. A small subtraction like realizing a ring you always wear is suddenly elsewhere. The boy's hand warmed. The red marble pulsed faintly in the headboard's eye. Hawthorne smiled the way surgeons do when the body obeys a plan and does not punish them for it. Something moved under the boy's collarbone. An answering bud, peeking. Daphne's laugh arrived shredded, grateful. "There," she said to the air, to David, to the season. "There." Elias swallowed a roomful of dust and found a pocket of voice. "What happens to me?" Hawthorne glanced at him, polite surprise that a vessel might speak post-decanting. "You'll recover," he said. "People are generous with their spare rooms." Daphne kissed Elias's forehead, the blessing of a queen who has already signed the pardon and sent it by slower courier. The wound fluttered, indecisive, and then closed like a mouth satisfied. The candle went short. Far below, near the kitchen where no child stood, a marble rolled off a bench and did not hit the floor. Dawn came sideways, pale and underfed, sliding through slats like a thief who'd lost his appetite. Elias woke to quiet too perfect for a house. Payne sat by the bed like a patient dog, present, watchful, not yet licking his hand. The dressing was clean. The iodine crown had dried to the color of old tea. He remembered everything with the clarity of ice. On the landing, the line of wooden animals had become a procession down the stair, nose to tail, heading for some small, promised country. The red marble still watched from the headboard, no longer lit from within, just glass, just red, just an eye where wood had been blind. He reached to pry it out. It didn't move. It looked back with the fleck of amber green he'd noticed in the boy. The room stepped 1 degree closer to him and stopped, like a friend who knows your threshold. He dressed. The shirt refused the left sleeve until he taught it manners. In the kitchen, Daphne stood with a travel mug, lipstick the color of old pomegranates. Hawthorne read a paper whose date he didn't see. The headline might have been weather. The boy sat at the table, shoulders narrow in a school jumper, hair damp as if from a shower taken in imaginary water. He looked up, not fully, just the way shy children look up when taught to be shy. And Elias saw that the bud under the clavicle had become a smooth disc under the wool. "The shape of a future scar, tea for the road?" Daphne asked, as if last night had been hospitality, as if the house were a hotel with very strong opinions. Hawthorne closed the paper exactly on the fold. "You'll be tired for a week," he advised. "The body dislikes edits, rest. You consented to research. We'll be in touch if the lab sings." He said sings like a scientist borrowing a poet. Elias looked past them to the sink, where a glass sat with a red ring at its base. He didn't need to taste it to know what had dissolved there. The boy followed the glance, then reached into his pocket and took out another marble, blue this time, and pressed it into Elias's palm with ceremony. "For the tram," the child said in a voice that had not used words in years. Daphne's smile was nuclear winter. Hawthorne's eyes shone with a father's cruelty, love with a task. On the doorstep, the ocean slapped the rocks with ordinary violence. Jacaranda blossoms littered the path in a purple geometry that meant nothing and everything. Elias stepped out. The house seemed to exhale behind him, windows clearing, roof settling into the day. He walked toward the corner, hand clenched around the blue marble, then stopped and looked back up at the guest room window. For a moment, only that, the red eye in the headboard caught the morning and threw it back. A bright coin flicked by a child's thumb. He didn't wave. He didn't run. He simply learned a new way to carry his shoulder, as if a door had been installed there and the world might push through at any time. On the tram, he chose a seat by the window. His reflection looked like a man returning from a small war that had not made the news. He opened his palm. The blue marble rolled into the web of his fingers and shivered once, measuring him. Down the carriage, a boy in a school jumper stared too steadily for the wobble of the tracks, then became a woman with a phone when Elias blinked. At home, he lay on his bed and listened without pretending not to. In the frame at the foot, a small red circle waited where no carpenter ever cut an eye. If he stared too long, he saw a fleck of amber that could have been the sun. When he closed his eyes, he saw a room where a door is never quite closed, a boy whose hand is always almost on his heart, and a house by the ocean practicing how to breathe. He slept badly and well. When he woke at 3, a marble tapped in the timber once tick and was quiet, like a courtesy between neighbors who share a wall. He did not touch his scar. He did not pray. He counted his ribs. He counted his breaths. He counted the doors in the apartment and wondered which one led back to Cliff Street and which one to him. You've just heard the story of a house where a child's name was whispered from inside the walls, a name that should never have been spoken. Some say it was imagination. Others say once you hear the voice, it never really leaves. If this tale chilled you tonight, remember, there are more voices, more stories waiting in the dark.
Make sure you subscribe to Dark Night Horror Stories so you never miss the next one.
And as you fall asleep tonight, ask yourself, if you heard your own name whispered from behind the wall, when would you answer?